Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad Tehami. The second round of the National Security Committee meeting is underway with Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif in the chair. And in the first round of this particular National Security Committee meeting, deliberations regarding the law and order situation in the country were made, and deliberations were made in order to deal with the re-emergence of the threat of terrorism in Pakistan. And the participants during the first round reaffirmed Pakistan's commitment to deal with this particular threat with a full force. And also the Interior Minister Rana Sanaullah during his interview also said that Pakistan may target banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan militants in Afghanistan if the authorities in Kabul did not take any action against them. The de facto authorities in Afghanistan, which are the Afghan Taliban, had been expressing their assurances as per the Pakistan's Foreign Office that they would cooperate in countering terrorism from the Afghan soil that emanates towards Pakistan. But a recent statement by their spokesperson says that the impression that the TTP is present on Afghan soil is incorrect. That is a clear-cut, utter denial by the Afghan authorities. And now, after this particular statement by Interior Minister Rana Sanaullah, they have reacted and termed the remarks by Interior Minister as provocative and baseless. Earlier, similar sort of statement was made by Foreign Minister Bilawal Bhutto Zardari at the UN, and he also categorically said that TTP is an absolute red line for Pakistan, and Pakistan reserves the right for a direct action if no action by the Afghan authorities is taken in that regard. Earlier, the United Nations and the US had also expressed support towards Pakistan in order to deal with the threat of banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan. Now, the US has allocated $15 million in its 2023 budget for Pakistan to enhance security along the Pakistan-Afghanistan border. Now, we'll be talking about the importance and the timeliness of the National Security Committee meeting. Also, why the Afghan Taliban are denying the presence of the banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan over there on the Afghan soil. What sort of options Pakistani authorities would be utilizing to deal with this particular threat, and what especially when we talk about the United Nations Security Council, that happens to be the major organ that is designed to ensure global peace and security and avoid any threat to its member state, the UN member state. What happens to be the responsibility of the United Nations Security Council at this particular point in time, and what does international law say about this particular thing when a certain state is threatened by militants such as banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan? We'll be looking into these questions, and we are honored to have been joined in the studio by Dr. Zafar Nawaz Jaspal. He's expert foreign affairs. Dr. Jaspal, thank you very much for taking time out for Views on News. Really appreciate that. And on Skype, we are being joined by Mr. Abid Latif Sindhu. He is senior analyst. Mr. Abid Latif, thank you very much for your time for being on Views on News. We really appreciate that. Let me begin the discussion with you, Dr. Jaspal. On one side, we see that the Afghan Taliban expressed their reassurances that the Afghan soil won't be allowed to be used against any other country, and especially Pakistan. And there had been in negotiation with the Pakistan's Foreign Office as well. But at the same time, the statement which has come from the spokesperson of the Afghan Taliban, Zabiullah Mujahid, that the impression that the TTP is present on the Afghan soil is incorrect. So what, I mean, there is a huge difference between both the positions.
I think that the Afghan Taliban has a limitation in dealing with the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan because they were comrades in arms prior to the Americans' withdrawal. And Pakistani authorities also ignored that factor. So they were the fighters together. TTP was supporters to them in the Pashtun areas of the Pakistan, and as a result, now they are enjoying their hospitality. There is no denying fact. Second is that, of course, we requested the Afghan governments, and we have been requesting since 1 year, that they try to rein in. And I think that the government of Pakistan, when adopted its appeasement policy, that was also an outcome of this arrangement, that we were trying to facilitate the Afghan Taliban, that in a manner they try to control them. But Afghan Taliban miserably failed in that context. And even they are blackmailing Pakistan in certain cases when they said that we can establish a good relations with India, X, Y, Z. So that establishes two factors. One is that anyone who is sitting in Kabul, we cannot expect that he will be going to act as we wishes. They try to act according to their own security needs and their own realization. So in that context, we must be clear about these kind of things. Second is that Pakistan, if, as you pointed out, that they, you can say they objected or there is hue and cry over our Interior Minister's statement, they must be given a clarity on this, that no, we are not going to compromise. But of course, we will try to strengthen our border. We try to adopt different methods. When they cut the wire on the border, why we were not, you can say, ending or mending that fence. We try to, and the government of Pakistan have to give a political cover to the armed forces and give this order to the armed forces. Anyone who is illegally crossing the border, he must be shot on the spot, as the other states are doing with the Afghans. Why the Afghans are not crossing the borders with the Central Asians? Because they are adopting a very firm, strict border policy. So instead of saying that we will go and hit their inside Afghans, no, we can limit them on the border and we do not permit them to crossing. And my final point on this context is, yes, I fully agree with you that Afghan Taliban have failed. Their statements indicates that they are providing them a shelter, and at the same time, I am not clear because there is a difference of opinion. They are also using the TTP as a pressure tactics on Pakistan.
Okay, your point is well taken. Very important point highlighted by Dr. Jaspal. Mr. Sindhu, what do these denials by the Afghan authorities depict? First, we saw that they made pledges towards Pakistan that the Afghan soil won't be allowed to be used. Now their spokesperson says that TTP is not in Afghanistan. Rather, there is a proof that it is present within Pakistan. And similar sort of a statement also came to the fore by the TTP leader also, that we are operating from within Pakistani territory and we don't need any other soil to operate from. So what does this particular stance by the Afghan authorities in particular depict?
Yeah, Dr. Jaspal has very rightly elaborated that there is a nexus between Tehrik-e-Taliban and the terrorists, at the other side of the border. But, once the Howard Zinn was asked that since you being a great historian and you dejected by some of the American policy, would you like to leave USA? He very, candidly said that I don't want to be victim of US foreign policy, leaving USA and settling in some other country. So actually what is happening is that we, Pakistan has become a victim of US foreign policy over a period of time, that we have been collaborating in our good sense and in good faith to stabilize the region. We have been working in alliance with the NATO forces, with the US government, and over a period of time with all the stakeholders and players, regional and also extra-regional, to bring stability in this region. But as far as now the current situation is concerned, there are a few factors which has to be considered. Number one is that, we have to differentiate between the border and the frontier. Afghanistan and Pakistan border is also, it's a very tricky place because it's simultaneously it's a border and a frontier also, as Dr. Jaspal has said, that even if the violations are made physical or kinetic violations, the response has to be measured, response has to be quantitative, and it has to be not impulsive, but it has to be immediate. So these things, we have recently seen that at the German border also, at Balochistan also, that even the artillery fires were exchanged between, mortar fires were exchanged from the Pakistan side and artillery fire was initiated from the Afghan side. So it speaks that there is a purpose, there is the authorization, because it seems that from the government in the Kabul is actually sort of authorizing this mired madness or whatever I would say, in the garb of telling or denying the complete fact that they have no control over the Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan, which is actually ganging up with all the available nomenclature, or I would say the syndicated efforts of Ehrarul Hind, or Ansarul Mujahideen or ETIM or IMU, and things like that. So it is very clear that this is going on with the intention, and if this is going on with the intention, then the reiteration which has been made today that this is not going to be tolerated in future or for the times to come is, I think, very accurate, very timely, and very responsive.
Right, Dr. Jaspal, when we talk about the statement which came from the TTP leader also, by the very connotation of it, it happens to be very dangerous. But the similar sort of, before that we saw that there was an expression by the Afghan authorities, okay, we are not going to let the Afghan soil to be used. Now, if there is a nexus, as you have already mentioned, between TTP and the Afghan Taliban, and you have also mentioned that they are trying to use TTP to have some sort of a leverage. Now, in that sort of a scenario, what do you think happens to be the most viable option in order to engage with the Taliban when it comes to the Pakistani authorities?
I think that we have to engage the Afghans. Naturally, it's a neighbor, and we have investment on the Afghan Talibans, and we want a peaceful neighborhood, and we know that Afghan Talibans are failing to provide that. I think that Pakistan, at the diplomatical level, give a clear message: we are no more your advocates in the international scenarios, and we try to learn, and which the Pakistanis have failed to learn in the last 4 decades, that we were always thinking that, oh, like-minded government always appeasing us. No. Afghans never appeased. Taliban never appeased us, even when they were in 94, 96 to 2001. A, and B, yes, we have to improve our relations with them because we look towards the Central Asia and the road network, all these projects, and a peaceful neighbor is always an advantage. But one thing is very clear. Whether you deal with the terrorists or whether you deal with their sponsors, they all understand power of the gun. And without using the power of the gun, if we expect that these militants or radicalized militants will be controlled, that is difficult. I'm not advocating here that we cross the border and hit them there. No, but we have to manage the border. We make our border more stronger. And within our own border, across, you can say on the Pakistani side, of course, we know our agencies have a experience and wherewithal to deal with these terrorists. After Zarb-e-Azab, we were successful. So we were very successful, and we know how to deal with them.
So when, Dr. Jaspal, when it comes to the border management, it was a gigantic exercise of border fencing over there. And at that time, we also saw the shelling from across the border. And many of the fencing parties were martyred as well. Almost 4 to 95% of this was complete some months back now. There have been incidents of physically uprooting this particular thing. When you talk about that, when we try to understand, there should be definitely an interest when it comes to the Afghan Taliban ruling that particular territory. So it should be the conduit for the energy transit as well towards the Central Asian states. So don't you think they should realize that this particular border fencing is very important and crucial when it comes to regulate trade and also stop the illicit trafficking also?
That's correct, but in the last 4 decades at the border we had an illegitimate trade, illegitimate economic activities, and people are living there. But what is the point here is that here analysts are, or we all are, too much, you can say, move with this jargon, Central Asian networking through the Afghanistan. Yes, we desire, but first we have to secure our home. Without securing a Pakistan, what kind of a networking we are going to do it? Second is, yes, I fully agree with you when you said when we are making the fence or sometimes fence is broken by shelling of that, why our soldiers are sleeping then? They can go for a counter fire. If the fire comes, fire is stopped by the fire. That is simple rule.
There had been a response, but it of course has to be measured because the Pakistani authorities or the armed forces always realize that there shouldn't be any sort of a collateral damage, and that very response should be very measured.
That's a sensible move. That's a sensible move. But in the border area where the criminals are firing on the fence, what is the collateral damages there? We have to be very careful and we have to make a plan over it, and we give a message very clear, and according to stop the collateral damage, you announce it. That in the border areas, in certain places, if we are going, if this thing happen, we are going to fire. Why the border people? People are not living, yes, at Chaman and some places border is very passing inside the houses, but not entire from where the smuggling is taking place. First we have to strengthen our own house, we have to look within the house, and we have to strengthen our border forces and ask them why this happened. Insiders are also involved. The problem with the Pakistan, this current terrorism is that this across the border sponsored terrorism has a more facilitator inside, and we can counter these insiders with a firm policy, and the firm policy is not based on winning and hearts and minds, it's a winning the mind with the gun. That's simple.
Right. We are joined by another participant on the phone line, Mr. Kamran Yusuf. He's a senior journalist. Mr. Yusuf, thank you very much for taking time out for views on news tonight. We really appreciate that. We are talking about the Afghan Taliban's responsibility, utter denial by the spokesperson that the TTP doesn't have safe havens over there on the Afghan soil. Rather, there is a proof that the TTP is operating from within Pakistan. Now, when it comes to managing the border, as Dr. Jaspal already alluded to, the Pakistani authorities have to be very conscious regarding that border management. What's your take regarding this particular thing?
Well, as far as Afghan Taliban are concerned, this is very much clear that our strategy with regard to Afghanistan and Afghan Taliban has clearly failed, and there is no denying the fact, and even officials now privately admit that our policy over the years to support or Afghan Taliban is really not working, because we were hoping when Afghan Taliban returned to power that they would look after Pakistan's interest, particularly in tackling banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan. But those who know Afghan Taliban and also know, TTP and other groups, everybody knew at that time that this is not going to happen. And as now you just also mentioned that this is the official line taken by the Afghan Taliban. Yes.
But Mr. Yusuf, that was the commitment that was made by the Afghan Taliban themselves in the accord that they struck with the United States of America in the form of Doha peace deal. They made that commitment. So naturally, there would have been a sort of an expectation, especially from the neighboring countries, that the Afghan soil won't be allowed to be used against them.
Absolutely. And I think let's take the example that the Afghan Taliban have made commitment not just with Pakistan but with the international community that they will not allow their soil to be used again by any terrorist outfit. And if any country is really affected by, because of the safe havens in Afghanistan is Pakistan. And if, for example, Afghan Taliban addresses Pakistan's concerns, that will certainly, create a huge goodwill in Pakistan, and also Afghan Taliban can tell the international community that, look, that we are serious. But the problem is now when Afghan Taliban are in a state of denial, as you mentioned that their official line is that there are no TTP sanctuaries inside Afghanistan, and said that their leadership was here for negotiations with the Pakistani authorities. The problem is inside Pakistan. So now there is a dispute. Pakistan says that TTP is operating from Afghan soil, while Taliban say no, that they are not operating on their soil. So that's the problem now, and that is why we are facing this problem. And I agree
Mr. Yusuf, now it is not only Pakistani authorities which are saying that the TTP has safe havens over there. The statement by the Interior Minister as well as the Foreign Minister has well been corroborated by the statements which actually came from the United Nations Secretary General, Mr. Antonio Guterres, also, as well as the United States of America State Department. And in fact, the US budget contains a provision of $15 million for Pakistan to enhance security along the Pak-Afghan border also. So do you think this is going to play a very important role when it comes to the border management on this particular frontier?
You know what I'm saying, that I'm not saying that there are no TTP sanctuaries inside Afghanistan. The problem is that Afghan Taliban are not now accepting that. And they say that they are not on their soil. So this is the real problem and a challenge for Pakistan to convince the Afghan Taliban that, look, that TTP is operating out of Afghanistan. You need to, do something about it. And secondly, I think, as Professor Saab was earlier talking about, I think we need to take the blame that under what conditions that we started talking to this dreaded TTP directly and then allowed as part of confidence-building measures, certain terrorists inside Pakistan, and in the hoping that they would become, peaceful people and become normal citizens. Instead, they use that window of opportunity to regroup. So certainly, while we point fingers at the Afghan Taliban, I think we also need to introspect and reflect on our strategy, that what we were doing. And I hope that, that as we see the National Security Committee, is meeting and today also held the session, that they would come up with a clear roadmap and a clear vision that what we have to do as far as, this TTP threat is concerned, this terrorism is concerned. And of course that U.S. help as far as other countries' help is also needed at this critical juncture when Pakistan's economy is also struggling. But first, I think we have to have a clear vision, clear roadmap that what we have to do with these groups.
So, Mr. Yusuf, at that very time, since there was an expectation by all the neighboring countries that the Afghan authorities, the de facto authorities over there who had just taken over that country after 2 decades of war, are not going to allow this particular soil to be used against any other country, they urged the Pakistani authorities at that time to enter into negotiations with the banned Tehrik-e-Taliban Pakistan. Now, don't you think they should have taken onus of it and realized that Pakistan had been advocating a peaceful and a prosperous Afghanistan, and it was Pakistani authorities that had been vigorously facilitating the Afghan peace and reconciliation process?
I think that's the problem, because Pakistan's expectation was that the Afghan Taliban would at least, if they do not take, action against the TTP, but at least they would neutralize, TTP and their affiliates. But instead, as you mentioned, they offered their good offices. They tried to broker a deal between Pakistan and the TTP. And, that didn't happen. And I don't think so. They took the full responsibility. I think either Pakistan should have clearly told Afghan Taliban that if they were interested in having some kind of, peace deal with the TTP, then they should have come up with some guarantees. And it appears now they are backtracking from, that commitment. And that is why I think initially I pointed out that our expectations from the Afghan Taliban and those who were hoping that the return of Afghan Taliban would serve Pakistan's interest, they were certainly mistaken. So given Afghan Taliban's approach and their attitude, I think we need to really revisit our strategy and think about it, that how we want to pursue, because we have paid huge price both in terms of men and material to restore law and order in this country. And if TTP is now staging a comeback and other groups are also, targeting Pakistan, this is certainly not acceptable, and this is certainly, needs a renewed push to stem the tide of this terrorism and extremism in Pakistan.
So, right, your point is well taken. Mr. Yusuf, one last question. As Interior Minister Rana Sanaullah in his interview said that on one hand he categorically said that Afghanistan is our brotherly country and we will first talk to them to dismantle the TTP hideouts and hand over groups members to Pakistan. At the same time, he said Pakistan may target TTP militants in Afghanistan if authorities in Kabul did not take any action against them. Now, taking action against the TTP militants in Afghanistan. If this particular threat continues unabated and the Afghan authorities don't help in order to dismantle that threat from the Afghan soil, and if Pakistan goes with this particular option of targeting TTP militants on the Afghan soil, where do you think the international communities or the United Nations support is going to be?
I think international community, particularly the U.S., will certainly, support Pakistan. And I think even previously we saw that Pakistan, though they never publicly acknowledged, they did carry out some cross-border raids. And the U.S. was supportive of Pakistan's position because they believe that Pakistan took those actions in self-defense. But I believe that would be as a last resort. What I understand, despite differences with the Afghan Taliban, despite some issues with the de facto rulers of Kabul, Pakistan would continue to pursue, diplomatic channels, urge Afghan Taliban to, get rid of, TTP and take actions. And if all those actions fail, then certainly Pakistan can reserve the right to, take action. But I believe that will be as a last resort. I still believe that Pakistan will push the Afghan Taliban to take action themselves, and hoping that they will listen to Pakistan's advice, because Afghan Taliban also need to understand that without Pakistan, they cannot achieve durable peace, and also they cannot, get the kind of recognition that they needed. If Pakistan is not satisfied with Afghan Taliban, then forget about other regional countries, other international countries will really, recognize the Afghan Taliban. So it is, I believe, the onus is on the Afghan Taliban to pursue prudent policies instead of, confronting with Pakistan, because they have to take a decision. Either they side with the TTP or they have to look for long-term good relationship with Pakistan.
Right, your point is well taken, Mr. Kamran. Yusuf, thank you very much for joining us on the phone line. We really appreciate that. Now, Mr. Sindhu, when we talk about this particular statement of Interior Minister Rana Sanaullah that Pakistan may target TTP militants on the Afghan soil if the Afghan authorities don't take any action against them. So where do you see that international support, especially of the major world powers, including the US, as well as the regional powers, including Russia and China and Iran, as well as the UN, going towards?
Yeah, as Kamran Sahab has said very accurately, that I think we have to understand one thing, that the de facto government of Kabul is actually not the de jure government. No one internationally has still recognized the Afghan government. And once the Afghan government says that they have, if they say that they cannot control the situation inside the Afghanistan, where this nexus is being built between TTP and these renegade elements, then I think we have to very elaborately and very categorically, we have to tell them that if you cannot control them, and if the nexus is built and it is operative, then I think we have to take the action. And I think in that scenario, Chinese government they have their own troubles with the Afghan government. As you know, that in 2021, they had a very bad patch with the NDS, and the same way they are also very concerned about the Turkestan element of the terrorist groups which are active in Afghanistan, and also they are trying to have disturbance in a particular area of the Chinese region. So in this context, I think Pakistan has to be very clear and very clairvoyant by telling the Afghan Taliban government that if again these type of perpetrations are committed, and especially the damaging of the border fence, or having the artillery fire from their side, or invasion in sort of raids or ambushes at this part of the border, then I think Pakistan has to take all measures, and diplomatically also, and in terms of the regional commanders also, they have to be very responsive and very ruthless in eliminating any type of aggression which has to be targeted or which has to be directed against the Pakistani territory.
Right, your point is well taken. Dr. Jaspal, when we talk about international community support, in case Pakistan takes a direct action against the TTP militants on the Afghan soil, where do you see that one heading? Because we have seen a clear expression of the support by the US as well as the UN in this regard.
No, I have a different take on it. Crossing the Afghan border and striking the TTP hideouts in Afghanistan, it will be an act of aggression. Pakistan must refrain from it.
Okay, how is it act of aggression? Because according to Article 51 of the UN Charter, which I would like to quote, nothing in the present charter shall impair the inherent right of individual or collective defense if an armed attack occurs against a member of the United Nations, which of course in this case Pakistan happens to be the member of the United Nations, until the Security Council has taken measures necessary to maintain international peace and security.
No, this article, if you can revisit it, you would find that violation of the border it's an act of aggression, number one. Number two, we are communicating to the Afghan Taliban that, or Afghan government, that your soil is continuously used by TTP and they are targeting us and we will be going to. But the point is, when you strike there, it will be counted as a hot pursuit or surgical, or you can say whatever you call it, it is aggression. Now, in this context, how we define it, yes, we can defend that our security has been perpetually violated despite our warning, so we retaliated. But when we are striking on the Afghan, can we are going a war with the Afghan government or not? Because striking on the Afghan territory is a strike on the Afghanistan, not on the TTP. So first point is here, when we look about the Afghanistan as a friendly state, as a friendly neighbor, then we try to refrain from there. Number two, yes, we communicate them. We have many diplomatic methods. We have to do many things, and on the basis of we try to hold it. We strengthen our, we can use our strength at the border and inside of our territory, and we can crush them. Why we are going to strike there? Let a strong border, you can say, managing the border crossing, that is the answer to this. When we are not able to control our own border, we are not able to fire on our own border, then why we are going to fire there? This is number one. Second point, which is very particular, at the moment, everyone will encourage Pakistan, including the United States, that we strike on the Afghan territory. They will say, in the name of terrorism. Then we are qualifying and justifying, which we never accepted officially, the drone attacks on our territory by the American forces. Or are we justifying the Americans' act of Salala? No. So we will be we act as civilized neighbors, we will be we act as a mature state, but of course, by strengthening the border and killing these terrorists within the Pakistani border is the answer to this question, rather than showing the aggression. Otherwise, then we are justifying what the Indians are saying, hot pursuit or surgical strike. So we are living in a community of nation. How it, on the one side, on the west we have a different strat, on the east we have a different strat. We prepare our counter-terrorism strategy, and counter-terrorism strategy works only within Pakistan, not in Afghanistan.
So Dr. Jaspal, when continuously repeated concerns and alarms have been raised and they've been discussed with the Afghan authorities over there, Pakistan going for the right of self-defense in order to retaliate, and that is what the provision, the further line measures taken.
The right of I read this article number of times. Right of self-defense started from your border, not from the inside of the other state's territory. This is number one. So right of self-defense is that when we hit them on the border, when they are crossing or when they are hitting, that is the right of self-defense.
That continues to happen. They continue to launch attacks from Afghan soil towards Pakistan. Pakistan keeps on reiterating
there's a difference. There are launching pads.
So what happens to be the responsibility of the Security Council? Should it take cognizance by itself, or rather a member state should go and knock its door?
No, we are saying to the Afghan, and Afghans are saying that we are trying. We have to understand what is the Afghan Taliban's limitations. They have a limitation. Number one, as in the beginning I said, they are comrades, maybe that's the reason. But apart from that, the Afghan Talibans they lack the experience as well as wherewithal to deal with such kind of the group. Why? Because they have only 1 year's experience. They are facing the IS, they are facing the Daesh. I'm not defending the Afghan Taliban here, but I am only looking the law according to the sovereign state's behavior.
Right.
Second is that you are ready to strike their pads in Afghanistan. There are different methods to strike it. Why you are not striking their pads within Pakistan? Why you are failing within Pakistan?
The combing operations are going on. We just saw another operation.
Since 2 days or since Friday to date, we are hanging on our National Security Council meeting. Wait for it. Of course, we will be, our ruling elite will be coming up with a wise policy. But in my humble submission is that all policies or these kind of things shall not be going to reflect aggressive designs of Pakistan.
Right. So when we talk about, when it comes to the question of Afghan Taliban's capacity, the skill, and the so-called short time they have got, almost a year after the international troops withdrew from there, but the kind of statement that the Afghan National Defense Ministry has given says something very otherwise, which categorically says that Afghanistan was ready to defend its territorial integrity and independence.
What else they say?
And knew how to defend the country.
What else they say?
What else they say? Capacity is overruled by this statement.
What else they say? Look, Afghan, whether Taliban, whether Karzai, whether Ghani, is Afghan. Treat him as an Afghan when sitting in the Kabul. And I think we Pakistanis must learn that this era of Ummah, era of brotherhood, and these cliches which we use it's over. We treat Afghanistan as Afghanistan, and we have many ways. We cross them, we close the borders, and then we try to blackmail them. Why they can blackmail us? Why we can use this language that we can go and hit? No, that's not language. Right. The language is we have a political, we have a diplomatic, we have an economic, we have many ways to control this border. We can control the border rather than just making these statements that we will going to hit the pads inside. And if we control them, then the Taliban will start realizing from where the heat is coming.
Right. Mr. Sindhu, your take regarding this provision of the UN Charter, Article 51, and the right to self-defense of a UN member state, and keeping this particular relevant article in the light of the statement given by the Interior Minister.
Yeah, I would say that I think we have to adopt a mix of the policy which Dr. Saab is saying, that we have to adopt all the measures, be it the economic one, be it the diplomatic one, because even once the United Nations or the US or the Chinese government, tell something to the Afghan government to imply for, they absolutely deny that. So pressure, I won't say that it will work that way, but I think Dr. Saab is absolutely right that first we have to go for the other measures and other, I would not say the coercion, but other measures and other means to enforce or to at least make the Afghan government comply with our demands that their soil should not be used.
So if they don't do that, so what happens to be the responsibility of the Security Council? Do you think the Security Council should come into action right away in the emerging situation?
First of all, Afghan border is a very different thing. It is a very tricky affair. It is a very tricky border. Almost there are 200 villages which are divided. Half of the villages on the Afghan side and half of the villages on the Pakistani side. So to managing this type of border, which is also a border and a frontier, it's a very tricky thing. And keeping that thing in mind, and also all the United Nations Security Councils and other United Nations measures to enforce their will over Afghan government, I think we know the history that Afghan government will not likely to comply. In that case, I think after giving it a try, I think we should have some means available to at least show them that we mean business, and the means of punishment and also the diplomatic maneuvering. I think we have to take both these means to achieve a target or objective that their soil is not used against us.
Right. Dr. Jaspal, very quickly, unfortunately, we're short of time now. Mr. Yusuf alluded to a very important point that if Pakistan is not satisfied, how the regional countries like China and Russia and Iran are going to be satisfied. There was another very interesting aspect to a statement that came from Acting Commerce Minister Mr. Haji Nuruddin Azizi, who says that Afghanistan seeks economic self-sufficiency and will be focusing and encouraging the people to use the Afghan products. And the second part of it is going to be enhancing the trade as well as going for the joint projects with China. And we are going to import things such as gas, oil and wheat from Russia as well. So when Pakistan is not satisfied, do you think no matter how many contracts they strike with these other regional powers?
I have to here first point is which we are referring with the United Nations. I link with my answer quickly with it. United Nations Security Council members do not look the Afghan Taliban government as de jure government, so they have nothing to do with it. The United Nations Security Council members, or including entire international community, condemns the terrorists, you can say, hideouts in Afghanistan, so they are with us. Finally, when you said Afghans, yes, they are working. poverty is there. Afghans are not listening anyone because of their warlike, and they have to learn to listen the world. If they want a trade with Russia or a trade with China, they have to bring a peace and security there. Otherwise, there's no trade. Are they going to trade TTP-like groups with the Chinese or with the Russians? I mean that the Chechens or the, you can say, this Uyghurs, they are going to trade. Taliban's statements are very good, but they have to act more. Like we can speak less, act more. That is the requirement. So we are dealing with a de facto government. No one is recognizing it. That is, and Pakistan has to realize this.
All right, your point is well taken. Dr. Zafar, Nawaz, Jaspal, expert foreign affairs, thank you very much for your time, for being in the studio. We really appreciate that. On Skype, we were honored to have been joined by Mr. Abid, Latif, Sindhu, senior analyst. Thank you very much for your time, also for being on Views on News. And that's all from today's show. Until the next one, take good care of yourselves.